How do we protect our children from paedophiles? How do we know that a football coach, a youth leader or a care worker isn't going to sexually abuse them? In a few moments we'll be debating whether or not our efforts to prevent paedophiles gaining access to children here are adequate. But first, Clare Murphy has been examining the notorious series of allegations that have emerged and that are still emerging from people who say that they were abused by swimming coaches. For the first time, victims of George Gibney, the coach against whom the original allegations were made, speak on camera. And Primetime tracks Gibney down to his new base in America.
He raped me there in the hotel. He had his hand around my neck and he said if I ever told anybody that he would sue my family and he'd sue me, and nobody would believe me because I was a nobody and he was George Gibney.
If you said to me, what's your one wish in life? It's that George Gibney would be behind bars, preferably in Ireland.
I think that his name is now connected to child abuse, and for that reason I think he's been leading an unsettled life since he left Ireland.
There is compelling evidence in this case. There is compelling evidence that Gibney committed these offences, and yet the state has failed to prosecute. It makes a mockery of criminal justice.
Clare Murphy, the RTE Primetime programme. George, I'd just like to ask you if you have any intention of coming back to Ireland.
So let's try and follow it up now and simulate that.
In 1981, George Gibney got the top job in Irish swimming. As national coach for the next decade, it was he that decided whether a swimmer would get the chance to compete for Olympic gold. When allegations that Gibney was a paedophile came to the attention of Gardaí in 1992, he was forced to step aside. But it was his replacement, Derry O'Rourke, who was convicted of multiple cases of child sexual abuse and in 1998 sentenced to 12 years. The irony, O'Rourke's horrific deeds were only uncovered during the investigation into Gibney, who it's claimed began abusing children when he started coaching in the 1960s.
He would groom you. He would keep talking to you. He would tell you what a good swimmer you were, and that if you listened to him, you'd become a better swimmer. And it's really brainwashing. But I mean, he would have known the things to say to a child of, say, 9, 10 years of age.
Lorraine, who has never spoken before publicly about the abuse she suffered as a girl, was in her late 30s before she ever discussed it with family and friends. She says George Gibney groped and molested her near the pool and audaciously once in the back seat of the family car as her father drove.
Maybe if we'd have all spoken up at the time, this wouldn't have gone on. But in hindsight, I feel we wouldn't have been believed. We really would, because it was even hard at that stage, 10, 12 years ago. People still didn't believe us then. So I hate the fact that, I mean, in the space of time that I swam, there was so many abused. So add that up over the years, there has to be an awful lot more people out there.
And indeed, there are claims that George Gibney remained a sexual predator right up until the end of his coaching career in Ireland. Another woman, a top swimmer during her teenage years, now 30, alleges that in 1991 she was first sexually assaulted by Gibney in Holland and raped that summer while attending a training camp in Florida.
He brought me back to the hotel and he had this kind of key, that opened the door, went in, he says he started discussing my times and he started discussing the training and how disappointed he was in me, and he wasn't happy with my performance, and he took out his file of facts and he was kind of going over specific times and performances and how bad I was and I was no good and I was never going to amount to anything, and he was kind of shouting at this stage, you know what I mean, and I became very distressed, and I completely was paralysed because I kind of knew what was about to happen. So almost suddenly he attacked me there, he raped me there in the hotel. And then I remember he had his hand around my neck and he said if I ever told anybody that he would sue my family and he'd sue me, and nobody would believe me because I was a nobody and he was George Gibney.
It appears the threats worked. It was a long time before she spoke of the alleged assaults. But older victims were now beginning to come forward, and in 1992 Gardaí began taking statements from at least 6 of the coach's earliest protégés. Criminal proceedings began, but in 1994 they were stopped in their tracks when George Gibney took a judicial review to the High Court and won.
Gibney's case was one of the first cases to go through the courts, and was an extraordinary case given that he was able to successfully suggest that because the most recent offence in relation to which he was charged was then 11 years old, that he would therefore be unable to secure or unable to mount an appropriate defence. And that was those were the grounds on which he took a judicial review of his case, and he was successful extraordinarily, despite the fact that the courts and indeed the Supreme Court on a number of occasions has ruled that prosecutions can be taken in cases going back some 40 years.
The state failed to appeal the decision, and following his legal victory, George Gibney left Ireland.
To psych yourself up to go and give a statement was the hardest thing I had ever done, because you're raking up something that was in the past. And then when he got away, it all seemed such a waste of time, you know, because he just walked scot-free and he was free to go where he liked and do what he liked, and we were just left.
The people who had come forward never got the chance to give evidence in court. They seemed destined to remain unheard. With George Gibney now in Scotland, the Sunday Tribune decided to print their words.
I had to talk to the victims, get the affidavits they made to the guards, look at them, and then decide, can this story stand up in the event of George Gibney suing the newspaper? And there was no question it would. The evidence was compelling that he was a paedophile and he was abusing kids.
The coverage lost Gibney his coaching job at an Edinburgh club. He emigrated to America, where he eventually surfaced coaching in North Jeffco, Colorado. Back home by 1997, 5 new victims felt ready to speak out, but they've all been subsequently advised that nothing will come of it. It was just over a year ago that we know Gardaí made a house call to one of the women to confirm that the DPP was bringing no new charges and extradition was impossible. The DPP has declined to comment on the cases.
You know, I'm afraid for the people, you know, whatever state he is in America. I'm afraid for them because I know what he's capable of doing, you know, and I'm absolutely devastated for that fact, and for the fact that what he did to me, he hasn't been held accountable for that, you know.
George Gibney lived and worked in Denver for several years, despite the fact that he was outed among the Irish community there. He bought a home in the city, but it was sold last year, a sign he was back on the move.
Of the 6 previous addresses that Primetime has linked to George Gibney during his years in Colorado, one was a post office box in the town of Wheat Ridge. We've had confirmation that on his arrival in California 6 to 8 months ago, he did exactly the same thing here. It seems P.O. Box 1235 in Calistoga Post Office was meant to provide the key to starting a new life.
The Napa Valley just north of San Francisco is the traditional heart of California's wine country. With its endless vineyards and over 300 wineries, it's also famed for its spring water and beautiful scenery. It's all about rest, relaxation, mud baths, pampering and Pinot Noir. And it was here that Primetime found George Gibney working at this exclusive hotel located just off the scenic Silverado Trail. Rates for rooms at the Calistoga Ranch Club can top $1,000 a night. Working this reception entails meeting and greeting a wealthier type of traveller. We approached him in the staff car park after he had finished his morning shift.
George, Clare Murphy, the RTE Primetime programme. George, I'd just like to ask you if you've any intention of coming back to Ireland to face the outstanding allegations of child sexual abuse against you, George. How do you respond to people who describe you as Ireland's most notorious paedophile?
We tried to talk to him again at his house a short distance away. Neighbours estimated he had lived in their community for about 5 months. His car was parked up, but there was little sign of life at 818 Chateau Calistoga. No replies to calls to the landline at his house, and no answer when Prime Time tried to contact Gibney on his mobile. The local law enforcement was more willing to speak.
This isn't something that we take lightly here in the state of California, especially in the county of Napa. Our sheriff is very adamant about wanting to track these people.
Prime Time has also confirmed that George Gibney used other addresses in the area, including a rental unit on the Silverado Trail and a family home in the small town of Grayton to the east. Here the Smiths, originally from Scotland, confirmed they had helped the former Irish coach set himself up in California and that they were aware of the allegations surrounding him in Ireland. While George Gibney may be notorious at home, his US record is squeaky clean. However, local police take his presence so seriously that the area's FBI field office has been informed.
We definitely hope that if Mr. Gibney has committed these crimes, that he wouldn't be a resident or a citizen here of the United States. Until there's some information that's brought to our attention that leads us to believe that Mr. Gibney is guilty or suspected of improper behavior regarding sexual abuse or child abuse, then we are in a predicament that doesn't allow us to enter him into Megan's Law. It doesn't allow us to investigate too much further. But we will share the information with the surrounding agencies, and if we don't turn anything up, we hope that they can in Ireland.
I would love someone to come forward more recent and that he would be charged and he would be extradited home. I would give anything for that, and then you just feel that children would be safe and justice would be done.
I think it's a matter for the Dáil to examine why our criminal justice system has failed so abysmally in this case and in so many cases of sexual violence, and begin to reform laws and introduce legislation that will allow for effective prosecutions in cases such as this.
To this day, the shadow of child sexual abuse still hangs over Irish swimming. Following the conviction of Derry O'Rourke, the Murphy inquiry exposed the sport's failure to deal with the scandals. Large-scale restructuring of the then Irish Amateur Swimming Association was recommended, but the renamed Swim Ireland is still facing over a dozen compensation claims from victims. This comes against the worrying backdrop of new allegations of child abuse surrounding a swimming pool in Wexford.
If a third case comes up, Swim Ireland are going to have to look at every structure again after the Murphy report, which recommended many changes. Unfortunately, those recommendations weren't directives, so Swim Ireland has not implemented the Murphy report, and swimming clubs have not implemented the recommendations. They've cherry-picked some of them, they've left others aside.
Back in California, management at the hotel have confirmed that Gibney left his job voluntarily, and police say there have been no recent sightings of his car in the area. Once more, it appears George Gibney has moved on, most probably to a place where nobody knows his name.
Well, attracting foreign students to this country to learn English has been an enormous growth industry in recent years. While undoubtedly there are many reputable schools in this business, the government has been concerned that many of them have been set up merely to collect fees from foreign nationals who enter the country in the pretext of being students, but whose real aim is to get a job here without a working visa. While much attention has been focused on that problem, there's another side to this business. Prime Time has discovered that many overseas students who genuinely are coming here to learn English are becoming trapped in a nightmare when the course they thought they paid for turns out not to be what it seemed. Clare Murphy reports.
When it comes to selling Ireland abroad, it seems education is the new prized product for our politicians. There's even talk of setting up a new agency to promote our scholarly reputation abroad. It's big business, and it's set to keep growing as millions of mostly Asian students clamber to learn overseas. Well-established English schools like here on Dawson Street in Dublin have found their industry transformed over recent years. Scores of language schools and training institutes have sprung up. Policing the student visa system and monitoring the quality of these establishments has proved a major challenge for our authorities. In fact, Prime Time has uncovered evidence that our weak regulation of this sector means genuine foreign students are in danger of being ripped off. Many people who come to Ireland with hopes of advancing their career prospects find themselves badly let down by our approved education providers.
EPTI, the Australian University of Ireland, enjoys a large campus in the medieval town of Drogheda.
The Executive and Professional Tertiary Institute uses powerful advertising through a network of Asian agents to enrol prospective students to their postgraduate courses. Many of their courses are delivered in partnership with a top Australian college, Edith Cowan University in Perth, who provide visiting lecturers. But EPTI, as experienced by these students from southern India, was a world away from the glossy brochures. In spring 2004, they sat standardised English exams and were told by EPTI agents that their language skills were good enough to travel here to study. They paid deposits for the Australian accredited masters, gave up their jobs and travelled halfway around the world. But almost 2 years later, they're reduced to scraping by, living in a cramped Dublin apartment after parting with a small fortune in Indian rupees. The young Indians had already paid most of the €9,000 cost of their master's programmes before they ever set foot in Ireland. You can imagine their shock and disappointment then when, on arrival, the mainstream campus that they expected was in fact this out-of-the-way office space in the Drogheda Docklands. The students expected their MBA to begin at the end of August, but were confused on arrival when they were told they were on immediate holidays from the course, which would now begin in November. Indeed, they say they effectively spent until the following February on what the college described as holidays. When classes began, they were told the Australian accredited MBA that they had travelled so far to attend was changing to an American course taught over the internet that they could have done from India.
Yeah, at that time we feel it like we are very cheated, and I don't want to do online course. That course can be done by anywhere, from anywhere in the world.
The Indians were disgusted that so little teaching took place at EPTI.
There is nothing in the college. They're not conducting the classes properly. I didn't learn it all. Just we used to go and pass the time. We didn't learn it at all because there are no good books. There are no material. There is no material at all. They didn't give any materials.
Investment I put is €9,000 in a year. I paid to the EPTI college. With that money, definitely I can say in India I would have lived without working for 5 years or 6 years without working. I thought I'll be having a great career. When I'll go back to India, I'll get a great jobs because of the degree, master degree that too I got from the foreign countries. So it will be a great value when I'll go back to India. I thought it, but there is no use coming here.
In a statement to Prime Time, the managing director of EPTI, Finian Connolly, disputes the criticisms made by Ravi and Venkat. He claims they were never enrolled onto the Australian MBA programme in 2004 because they did not have the required level of English. He claims they declined an offer of free English classes and instead accepted places on a free MBA preparation programme. He strongly denies that any 2-month holiday letters were issued by the school. But documentation given to the students by EPTI clearly acknowledges the receipt of fees and conditional acceptance onto the Australian MBA International Course 2004-2005. The students say they were never offered any free courses. Holiday break is from the 30th of August to the 20th of October on one student's letter, and from the 3rd of December to the 31st of January on his classmates, backing up their assertions that classes were few and far between. Ravi, Venkat and friends who had similar experiences at EPTI feel they have no avenue for redress. All they can do is warn others.
Some of my friends are also calling us to come here. Everybody we are saying to every people, don't come here, there is nothing here.
But the marketing of education Irish style continues apace. Just weeks ago, Education Minister Mary Hanafin led a trade fair to China. She pledged Chinese students would receive a top education here in a secure and supportive environment. For these women, promises like that must sound all too familiar. They're just 3 of hundreds of Chinese nurses that dug deep into their own and their families' financial pockets and paid a massive €10,000 to Euro College, a Dublin-based English language school run by this man, Ray Gunning. Contracts drawn up by Euro College promised to assist and guide the women towards eventual registration as nurses in the Irish healthcare system.
They said if I finish the course in Euro College, I can become a nurse in Ireland, and I will have over 30,000 euro per year for the salary.
The women were enticed to pay over the equivalent of 3 times their yearly Chinese income when they were shown slideshows and brochures featuring the campus of Trinity College Dublin, a Euro College educational associate. But when they arrived, no one would sign their contracts, and they were directed to a school in Malahide, North Dublin, that had been subcontracted by Euro College and that the women had never even heard of.
When I saw the school, we were surprised because the name of the language is not Euro College, it's ICE. So also, it's a complete different from pictures I have seen in China, because the agent working for Euro College told us we will study in Trinity College.
In the summer of 2004, Euro College moved to rented space in the Dublin Docklands attached to the National College of Ireland. Crowded classrooms meant they also used the neighbouring Jury's Inn, where some classes were conducted in hotel bedrooms. NCI didn't renew their tenancy last autumn and now says it's embarrassed by Euro College's use of the premises in its advertising. Inside Euro College, some teachers were becoming concerned at the pressure the women were under from management to take care assistant jobs in British nursing homes. Many of the women believed they had just 2 choices: go to Britain or go home to China.
The premise of Euro College was to train Chinese nurses to work in the Irish healthcare system. And I began to realise that they were actually being bullied to work as care assistants at minimum wage, or below the equivalent of the minimum wage in Ireland. In the UK.
Spring ran away from the British nursing home that she had been placed in after just 2 months because of the bad pay and conditions.
I just couldn't understand why the lots of Chinese girls still come to the Euro College. They paid 10,000 euro for a year, and they don't have the really classroom which belongs to Euro College, and they always change the teachers. You know what I mean? They got nothing from the Euro College, and they paid 10,000 euro to come to Ireland.
Judy, older than the others, was an experienced sister in the intensive care unit of a Beijing hospital. She hoped to secure lucrative work and the right to bring her husband and child to the West. Instead, she was brought to the brink by Euro College. Feeling coerced into accepting a low-paid position in Britain, she was so filled with despair that she brought a knife to one of her classes and threatened to harm herself.
Don't give me another opportunity. I will threaten them. I will hurt myself in front of them. But they didn't. They just ring the guard. I got the criminal case. But in that period, it's really tough for me. I just get my teacher and my classmates to help me.
Barbara had decided not to go to Britain and asked management for the attendance record needed to renew her student visa. She says she complained to immigration officials when the college would not supply the attendance free of charge and told her it would cost 650 euro.
No any contract, or no any statement, or no any documents, agreement mentioned. If I refuse to go to UK, I have to pay the money. No anything mentioned. I didn't sign any contract with your college. I have to the money if I refuse to go to UK. So it's ridiculous. Why I should pay?
Ray Gunning denies that Euro College staff have ever charged money for attendance records. He also denies that any of the women were bullied by Euro College to take care assistant jobs in Britain. One experienced nurse who taught the women at Euro College believes they were brought here by the school under false pretences.
I felt very strongly that the girls had been exploited, really, that for the vast majority it was definitely impossible for them to become registered here in Ireland. And I really felt that if we were going to be recruiting nurses to come from overseas to Ireland, then this should be done by the nursing bodies who would be aware of what the requirements were, A, to get registered, and B, what the hospitals would need in the way of staff.
Concerns about Eurocollege seem to stretch from recent to its very roots. In 2001, James's Hospital in Dublin signed a recruitment agreement with Eurocollege, but terminated it a few weeks later. Just 2 weeks ago, the higher education accreditation body HETAC demanded false claims that it was linked to Eurocollege be removed from the language school's website. Meanwhile, Trinity College have been paid advisors to Eurocollege since 2001. Trinity rents out clinical facilities to the language school, and the university's head of nursing, Professor Cecily Begley, has written letters of endorsement for Eurocollege. However, following queries from Primetime, Trinity College stresses its staff have no formal contact with Eurocollege students at any stage, and that the college never approved the images that appear in Eurocollege promotional material. The university is now reviewing its future relationship with the language school. The Eurocollege website claims that over 100 of its graduates are working as care attendants in British nursing homes or as registered nurses in Ireland. But the Irish Nursing Board has told Primetime that according to their records, Eurocollege assisted in relation to 11 women's applications, but these applicants were not registered because of incomplete documentation. Board alternate says they have no particular formal relationship with Eurocollege, and of the 17 nurses of Chinese nationality registered here, they cannot establish from their records if any of these attended Eurocollege.
The vast majority of girls that came here, I mean, they came with a very open mind and an open heart, and I think their dreams were really smashed in that they did feel they could get registered here, and their alternative was that they had to go somewhere they didn't really want to go, and it was very, very sad.
Despite the dubious claims, Eurocollege still seems to have access to the corridors of power. Senator Mary Henry, the independent Trinity senator, advises and made representations on behalf of the school in April 2004 when students were having difficulty getting immigration documents.
Unfortunately, it's very hard to know what is going on, and this is causing great embarrassment to Eurocollege, who are trying to recruit more people abroad, and also they are having problems for their students who, of course, don't have the required residency stamp.
Despite being nominated by Eurocollege as the official spokesperson that would answer questions put by Primetime, she declined to be interviewed. Another influential figure was Brian Cowan. In 2001, the then Minister for Foreign Affairs wrote to inform Ray Gunning, who has a home in Birr, County Offaly, that he had written a letter of support on his behalf. In more recent years, a succession of senior members of Fianna Fáil have been photographed with the businessman. In May 2004, Enterprise Ireland used €160,000 of public money to invest in the company. The Department of Enterprise too has given the nod of approval to Eurocollege by appointing Ray Gunning's close associate and fellow company director Lin Lin Lee to the government's high-level Asia Strategy Group. Ray Gunning, Eurocollege CEO, was unwilling to make himself available for interview in Ireland or abroad, despite repeated attempts by Primetime. Every attempt to arrange an interview with a Eurocollege representative was declined. We approached two directors of the company, Shirley Hastings and Lin Lin Lee, and asked them to explain why so many Chinese nurses were traumatised and upset by their experiences at Eurocollege.
Hello, Miss Lee, Miss Hastings, Clare Murphy, the RTE Primetime programme. We'd like to ask you, did you make any false promises to Chinese nurses?
Can you make appointments with me and I can sit down with you doing interview, okay?
Has Eurocollege successfully helped Chinese nurses to become registered in Ireland?
I have a meeting at 3 o'clock with A cells.
Surely you can just take 2 minutes to have a few words with us.
I can do an interview with you.
Do you think the cost of the course that you sold these women, do you think that represented value for money for them?
Prime Time again offered Miss Lee the opportunity to do an interview and she declined. In communications with Prime Time, the Eurocollege CEO Ray Gunning says his company delivers excellent value for money to its students and the school's primary goal was not to have nurses registered in Ireland. He claims they never overstate their relationship with Trinity College and that Eurocollege student surveys indicate a very high level of satisfaction. However, the Department of Education has confirmed that it recently helped facilitate a successful arbitration process between Eurocollege and another group of disgruntled students who wanted refunds. Others, though, have no expectations of a happy ending.
I don't think I can forget this bad experience. I was cheated by the West.
Rightly or wrongly, people are prepared to pay huge money to come here to play the education game. But there's people losing, and they're not just from abroad. Prime Time has established that the Irish taxpayer is also losing out because of the activities of some English language schools. The question now is what aspects of our education system should be up for sale. Michael Kilbride, a teacher here at O'Connell's CBS in Dublin city centre, was astonished to encounter one teenager whose family had paid thousands of euro to a language school, who then arranged for the student to enrol in a community school on the south side.
Now, when I heard that, I was absolutely shocked because basically I was dealing with students who were disadvantaged, and suddenly I came across an incident of middlemen or middle people or middle institutions that seemed to be making big money. And I thought that if a student came in through a language school, that they should have sent to a private school. And I mean a private school where the institution would actually pay the teacher's fees. But in this case, this language school was enrolling the student in an ordinary community school.
In fact, right across the country, places in our public secondary schools are being advertised by English language schools to the children of well-to-do Asian families. The product is known as the high school programme, with a year of accommodation and an education in one of our public schools, coming with a price tag of up to €13,000. Prime Time has established that bringing children here from outside the EU and placing them in our free schools is in direct contravention to government policy. The Department of Education confirms that these children can represent a burden to the state. The department also confirms that it has no idea how many children English language schools have brought into Ireland in this way. However, the marketing umbrella for dozens of language schools, MEI Relsa, is unrepentant. Half of its 56-strong membership offer variations of the programme.
The high school situation, it's not that our members are not selling education. They're selling a service which allows students to come into the country to take advantage of educational opportunities in Ireland. They're selling an accommodation service, they're selling a guardianship service, right down to a student counselling service, extra English tuition when necessary. While the school principals think that it's within the best interest of their schools to receive these students, then I would say that it will probably continue. But I would like to hear from the Department of Education on this issue, and I would like to see what the plan is going ahead.
For its part, the Department of Justice said it would always refuse entry to young people from outside the EU who come here with the sole purpose of attending a state-funded secondary school. The problem, most are minors from countries that don't require pre-clearance visas, like Japan or Korea, and once past immigration control, they don't currently have to report to the authorities.
They could ask principals to indicate the nationality of the particular students and why they're here, whether they're seeking asylum or whether they're refugees or they're the sons and daughters of migrant workers. Because if they don't fall into those brackets, then they're obviously being sent here to get an education. And, you know, who's bringing them and who's making money out of it. And, you know, if the market is growing, then, you know, the Department of Education should be benefiting from it, not middlemen.
The globalisation of education is a new opportunity. But in our haste to capitalise on world trends, are we overly focused on raking it in rather than regulating? The introduction of new legislation would protect all of our interests and show that we too are prepared to learn lessons.
mighty leap before a wonderful healing. They were among the soaring sound bites from Stormont today, on a day when the hype was at least matched by history. To their credit, key players like Ian Paisley did look beyond congratulation to reflect on the challenges that face the new power-sharing executive in the north. Clare Murphy spent the day at Stormont and now reports on past, present and the future.
They're the photo calls we never thought we'd see, but it appears that in a flash we filled an entire album of change. Today, a distinguished guest list was present to witness a miracle marriage of the extremes.
If you had told me some time ago that I'd be standing here to take this office, I would have been totally unbelieving.
We know that this will not be easy, and that the road we are embarking on will have many twists and turns. It is, however, a road which we have chosen.
With the seemingly insurmountable issues of violence, decommissioning and policing now conquered, Tony Blair and Bertie Ahern were finally able to shepherd all of the North's leaders across the Rubicon.
Dr. Paisley has decided to do this, and part of the reason why we've had such a honeymoon is they've decided to do it. If you're going to do it, don't have to do it, and that makes a certain sense. And don't forget, he has the great advantage that David Trimble never had. David Trimble always had Dr. Paisley hounding him. Now, Dr. Paisley is not going to hound himself, so he has the space to do it, the emotional space if he so wishes. And he has decided to do this. He has decided to do this in a goodish spirit. There is absolutely no question about that, and that can be sustained. It's just that rough and raw politics will come up.
This is today, and tomorrow will be tomorrow.
Indeed, real politics is fast coming down the tracks. Education, the first issue that could derail relations between the two main parties.
On the one hand, the Unionist Party is committed to saving the grammar schools, and the Nationalist Party is to getting rid of selection. And the grammar schools do very well for a small number of people, but they leave an awful lot of people unskilled, untrained. And that's particularly true in loyalist working class areas, which I think are going to be the problem over the next 10 years. And as well as that, there's a shrinking school population. So there are now 30,000 empty desks, and soon there'll be 50,000 empty desks. So that always brings problems. So it'll be a huge challenge to any minister to work that through.
Other areas that could yield controversy include health, planning, environment and the thorny issue of the introduction of water rates to raise much-needed revenue. Some argue the British government should have been more generous in its support for the new executive.
There just will not be the resources there that there have been in the past. Now, you may say, well, that's fair enough. We have to learn very quickly how to take tough decisions. But I think, given the immaturity of the political process here and the executive, I fear that a failure to get some additional resources in the short to medium term could have unfortunate consequences further down the road.
The United States will continue to support your efforts to further advance the peace process.
Attempts to negotiate a lower corporation tax rate for the North have failed for now, meaning intensive work will be needed to attract inward investment.
Well, I think my advice would be get on a plane to America as soon as possible and tell the good news, because it's a good news story. For decades we've had bad news from Northern Ireland, and that's embedded itself in a lot of the corporate psyche of American investors who wouldn't come to a place like this because they felt there was trouble or there could be trouble for their employees. I think the fact it's such a great news story means that people are going to, re-look at Northern Ireland, and I think that the fact that if Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness get on the ground over there and talk to businessmen and talk to industrialists, they've seen what happened in the South, they know it's English speaking, they know it's got access to the European market. There's no reason in the world why you shouldn't have a Northern Tiger as well as a Celtic Tiger.
Another piece of history will be written this Friday when the Taoiseach and the North's new First Minister will make a joint visit to the Battle of the Boyne site outside Drogheda. Ian Paisley says the visit will show how far we've come when we can celebrate and learn from the past. If it continues, this language of cooperation will encourage ministers in the new power-sharing executive at Stormont to engage in purely political warfare, because over time only they can prove sectarian battlefields
are a thing of the past.
First though, tonight, the story of missing Irish teenager Amy Fitzpatrick. It's literally every parent's nightmare that your child could simply vanish off the face of the earth. 15-year-old Amy disappeared on New Year's Day in Mijas near Fuengirola on the Costa del Sol. The police search was slow to get started, but now there's intense activity as the Spanish authorities are out in force looking for her. Meanwhile, her family can only wait and hope. Primetime's Clare Murphy is there, and this is her report.
It's the dream of many, a place in the sun. Gone the grey skies of home, worries and strife. And it's here that Amy Fitzpatrick's family moved 5 years ago. But in the last 9 days, their ideal world has been turned upside down. Amy lived along with her mother, brother and stepfather near the resort of Fuengirola in the south of Spain, in an area known as Riviera del Sol. On New Year's night, she disappeared, having left her friend's house in nearby Calypso, where she'd been babysitting, to make the journey home. The search effort has largely been focused on an area of wasteland in between, a shortcut the teenager regularly took. This is the path that Amy Fitzpatrick took that night, an unlit, lonely track surrounded by undergrowth. But search teams have found nothing here, no sign of the 15-year-old. And if she has indeed vanished, it's without a trace. At a news conference yesterday, Amy's mother Audrey made a desperate plea for her daughter to return home.
I just want to appeal to anyone who may be holding Amy against her will. Please, let my baby Bunton go. She's a loving kid who would never do anyone any harm. She'll be frightened. Please don't hurt her. And Amy, if you're there, and the time is going on and you're afraid to come home, please don't be afraid. There's nothing to be scared of. We just want you back with us where you belong.
Today, 230 emergency service personnel continued the search, which has now been extended as far as Marbella. Despite criticism of a delayed response by all involved initially, those leading the operation remain optimistic.
My job here is just to search the terrain, and we are doing that. And at the moment, we are not find any evidence, but we maintain the hope.
Just what happened when she left her friend's house that night remains a mystery, particularly to those who know her best.
She should come home if she has run away, because everyone misses her and we're all really worried about her. And just that, don't be scared to come home, because not that you shouldn't be worried about anything.
The whereabouts of the Dublin-born teenager is now making headlines across Spain.
It's a top story. It's a front page story every day since January 2nd. And for TV stations in Spain, it's well, it has all the ingredients of drama, Costa del Sol and everything, which makes an interesting story.
Although one woman living next door to the Fitzpatrick family says a clearer message now needs to go out in the search for Amy.
Everybody's fishing and everybody's desperate. We're all desperate to know what's happening next. You know, I've been sitting on the internet all of the morning and I've emailed GMTV, and this morning Sky News I've emailed 3 times now to say, please, you know, let us know what's happening.
Friends of Amy's claim she had been approached by strangers in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, while the local media have reported recent stories of attempted child abductions. But the local mayor says crime is no more a problem here than anywhere else.
The Costa del Sol is a great place to live. There is a lot of security, but unfortunately, you will have the odd incident, like any other place in the world. It doesn't mean it is an unsafe place. Many foreigners live here, and everyone seems happy.
But this latest event illustrates how the area has changed for the worse, according to some residents.
It's 100% different to what it was when I first came here. You could walk in the streets here at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, no problem, on your own as a woman or as a child. But now I wouldn't advise even an adult to go into certain places. Kids have got to realise that they are vulnerable. Whether they like to think they're vulnerable or not is another thing. But any kid, even up to 15, 20 years of age, is a very vulnerable person.
That report from Clare Murphy. Well, I'm now joined again from the Costa del Sol by Michael O'Toole, who's there for the Irish Daily Star, and by Jerry Higgins, who owns a pub there, the Spanish Arch in Fuengirola. First of all, Michael, let me start with you. I mean, there has been a lot of criticism and people have asked questions, but why it took the police so